Welcome to the NuChannel Sports Show on the Leeds Podcast Network. Happy New Year. I am so excited that you are back for yet another episode of the podcast. On this episode of podcast, I will discuss the top 5 NFL teams heading into the playoffs, and I'll also discuss top NBA stories and headlines, including the DeMar DeRozan experience. I mean, they have to be beyond ecstatic with what has occurred, and it has been in large part, in a very large part, to the DeMar DeRozan experience. DeMar DeRozan deserves an apology from damn near everyone, and I mean everyone associated with the NBA media. Because there was absolutely no one that was standing up and clapping their hands for the Bulls when they signed him to an $84 million contract or thereabouts, making over $20 million a season. Most people thought he was over the hill and overpaid. But the Chicago Bulls made a determination in a guy that they believed in. And much of what the hate, I should say, or maybe not even the hate, the criticism is probably a better word. The criticism that the Bulls received for acquiring DeMar DeRozan seems to have fueled not only DeMar DeRozan, but the entire Bulls franchise. This is the NuChannel Sports Show. What is good? This is a NuChannel Sports Show on the Leeds Podcast Network. I am so happy and so thrilled that you are back yet again for another episode of the podcast. Shout out to all of you for coming back. Happy New Year. We're in the year 2022. What's up? Year 2022. I'm so happy to be here, have an action, power-packed show for you. Before we get into the show, I want to tell you a little bit about the Leeds Podcast Network. We have various shows between Monday and Saturday for you to listen to on the network. You can also check out theleadsm.com if you're interested in reading articles about teams in the NBA and the WNBA. You can also check out theleadsm.com to learn more about the team podcasts. We have several team podcasts for teams in the NBA. So I'm telling you that there is content for you. Also, you can check out the NuChannel Sports Podcast. You can check out our podcast. We're starting up again this year, 2022. You're going to hear me and the guys more often on here and on our podcast. You can check that out wherever you listen to your podcast: Podbean, Stitcher, Apple, Google. We are everywhere. Also, check out our website, NuChannelSports.net. That's NuChannelSports.net. Also, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We out here. All right, let's get straight into this podcast. This is yet another podcast where I'm foregoing headlines because there's just too much to talk about. And I want to get straight into the show. The way I'm going to do this show, I'm going to start off with the NBA, then I'm going to go into the NFL. So let's start with the NBA, and there is no other place to start than to start with the DeMar DeRozan experience. I believe it was the first podcast or maybe the second podcast the NuChannel Sports Show has had on the Leeds Podcast Network. But I talked about being excited about what the Chicago Bulls were doing. Didn't know what it would lead to, but I was excited for them basically getting the best collection of talent that they were able to get during the off season. And honestly, it started even prior to the off season with the mid-season acquisition of Vucevic. And I was happy that they went all in when there was really no reason to do so. But they did so, and it is paying off in great dividends. I mean, they have to be beyond ecstatic with what has occurred, and it has been in a very large part, to the DeMar DeRozan experience. DeMar DeRozan deserves an apology from damn near everyone. And I mean everyone associated with the NBA media, because there was absolutely no one that was standing up and clapping their hands for the Bulls when they signed him to an $84 million contract or thereabouts, making over $20 million a season. Most people thought he was over the hill and overpaid. But the Chicago Bulls made a determination in a guy that they believed in. And much of what the hate, I should say, or maybe not even the hate, the criticism is probably a better word. The criticism that the Bulls received for acquiring DeMar DeRozan seems to have fueled not only DeMar DeRozan, but the entire Bulls franchise. So if you have a buddy, right, or you hear someone from NBA Twitter, like one of the bigger people saying, I told you the DeMar DeRozan experience is going to work, call them a liar. Ooh, I know you lying. Hey, I know you lying. You lying. No one thought it would be this good. Even an optimist like myself, who was excited with what the Bulls did, I was still saying, I don't know about that DeMar DeRozan side. I was like, I don't know. You know, those memes or those GIFs you see, it's like, I don't know. That's how I felt. I was excited with what the Bulls were doing, but when it came to the specific DeMar DeRozan signing, I was very meh. I was meh about that signing, but he's been phenomenal. He has been absolutely phenomenal, and you can argue that he is having, across the board, his best season as an NBA pro. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One, he heard the criticism. He definitely heard the criticism, and he took that to heart, and he has come out this season and has absolutely smashed. I think another reason why he's finding great success is because he is surrounded by a cast of characters, a cast of players that are ultimately all looking for the same thing: success in the NBA. They've all had some form of individual success. You start off with Lonzo Ball. He had success, maybe not so much in the NBA, but he was a high draft pick coming out of UCLA. I remember Magic Johnson told him, look in the rafters, Lonzo. Your name gonna be up there. Let me tell you something. His name will not be. His name ain't gonna be up in the LA rafters. But even then, when it goes and it gets traded by LeBron, he got traded by LeBron, right? You know, I'm gonna have to take a quick sidetrack. The LeBron GM hype and all that, sometimes it's annoying as a LeBron fan. Everybody's saying LeBron's the GM, but let's be real. LeBron made that trade. All right. So gets traded by LeBron, goes to the Pelicans, enjoys some success, starts shooting the basketball better. And everyone around the league feels good about him. Nobody feels bad. Nobody feels great. It's a very feeling about him. He's had some individual success, but he's a guy, even though he signed a lucrative contract, that was still looking to had something to prove. You go to Vucevic. He enjoyed really good success with the Orlando Magic. He had good years there, averaging big numbers, but on a bad team. He gets traded to the Chicago Bulls last season during the midway point of the season, thinking that his signing or the trade of him would propel them to the playoffs, and it didn't do that. So coming into the season, he had something to prove. Then you go to their stalwart, their guy, Zach LaVine. He's put up big numbers in his career, and he had a good season last year. But the question around him was, well, yeah, he can put up good numbers on a bad team, but if you build anything, is he somebody you can build something around? So he had something to prove. And I just told you about DeMar DeRozan. People were saying he's over the hill, overpaid. The Spurs don't want him anymore. And if the Spurs don't want him anymore, then he's really no good to anybody else in the NBA. And he has absolutely just kicked down all of those doors. But he had something to prove. So when you have your 4 best players on the team, all with something to prove, it is a recipe for greatness or disaster. Now, the disaster can come from where everybody's got something to prove. Everybody's trying to do too much. But watching this team in the preseason, I talked about it earlier in this podcast, it just gelled so quickly. And what DeMar DeRozan did just past week, if you don't know, he hit back-to-back buzzer beater, game-winning shots, no time left on the clock. And it's one of the rarest of rarest things in the NBA. I don't know if it's even been done in NBA history. And if it has, it's probably been done once or twice at best. And they weren't just, give me game-winning shots. There's no such thing as a give me game-winning shot. But these were the toughest game-winning shots you can take and make. One was off of one leg, a one-legged three-point shot. And the other was in the corner with 2 players jumping at him. He basically has to double pump and shoot the shot and absolutely buries the shot. I could not be more happy for an individual than DeMar DeRozan. We are living and watching the DeMar DeRozan experience. Because for so long in his career, he was in Toronto and he got love there, right? Like, we know DeMar, he got love. But at the same time, he was in Toronto, he's in Canada. And what hurt him even more is once he left Toronto, Kawhi Leonard got there and they won the championship. So for too long, we have really just have failed to appreciate the DeMar DeRozan experience. No, he doesn't take a lot of 3-point shots. We know that. But what he does do is he's extremely efficient shooting the basketball. He takes and makes tough shots. He is a tough shot taker and maker. But is he though? If you look at his shot chart, other than the insane daggers he's been hitting, he shoots it really in the same type of range. And when you go to a gym, let me tell you the range because you can't see it, but I had a shot chart, you'd be able to see it. Essentially, he shoots a step or 2 in front of the 3-point line, and he really shoots it towards the middle of the basket most of his shooting opportunities. Why? Those are their easier shots to make, but he makes them look extremely easy. And he's shooting damn near 50% from the field. I think his best season was as a Spur, when he shot 53% from the field. But his volume has gone up with the Bulls, and he's having his best season around. He's averaging right now over 26 points a game, essentially 27 points a game, 5 rebounds, and 4.5 assists. And his assist numbers are up as well. He's doing it all. And we're just enjoying the DeMar DeRozan experience, and I just wanted to tell you about it. I'm very happy for the dude. Shout out to DeMar DeRozan. So that was my NBA topic number 1. Let me give you NBA topic number 2. He's back. He's coming back. He's coming back. It's Klay. Klay Thompson is coming back. For all rumors and reports, probably, maybe by the time you listen to this podcast, he may have already played his first game back with the Warriors. We have missed Klay for essentially 2 seasons, and I've missed him. There's really nothing else to say. I've missed him. He's back from 2 brutal injuries, and I'm hoping to see the Klay that we saw prior to the injury. We don't know what we're going to get. We really don't. We know he's going to be a great shooter, but the thing is, we don't know how he's going to be moving laterally. Is he still going to be a good defender? Because his entire career, he's always been a good defender, right? That's probably the most underrated part of his game. Does not get enough appreciation because he's got a teammate who believes he's the best defender of all time and Draymond Green. I'm not even going to go there. Draymond Green is a great defender in his own right, but I think some of that is taken away the shine from Klay Thompson, and who I believe Draymond would tell you. I think if you had a conversation with Draymond Green, he'd tell you that Klay Thompson is an outstanding on-ball defender. And with the injuries that he's had, I hope that he's able to move laterally and put himself in a position to play the defense that we've become so accustomed to watching him play. I hope he's able to do that. I'm hoping that he is back to the level of being just great. I call him the machine. If you listen to this podcast, you know that's exactly how I feel about Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson is an absolute machine. The greatest shooting form of all time, of course, in my opinion, the greatest shooting form of all time. And I'm just happy he's back. So I just wanted to dedicate a topic to saying, Klay, welcome back. Happy to see him back. And by the time you listen to this podcast, he may have very well have already played his first game. Okay, NBA topic number 3. We're just flying along right here. We have a lot to cover. I want to talk about the mid-season trades. I'm probably going to dedicate another podcast to this, so I'll keep this one brief, but we are coming close to the mid-season trade deadline. We're getting very close to it at this point. We're already in the new year in 2022. So I want to talk about 5 teams that need to make some trades before the trade deadline. And I want to first start off with a team that you probably you didn't expect me when I said 5 teams that need to make a trade. My first 2 are probably 2 teams that you wouldn't expect, but when you hear my explanation, you'll get it. And then there are going to be 3 teams that you probably did expect me to mention. All right. So the first team that I'm going to mention that needs to make a trade before the trade deadline are the Houston Rockets. Obviously, the Houston Rockets aren't making trades to make the playoffs, right? The Rockets have one clear objective this season: be as bad as you can while looking as good as you can and getting a top 5 pick. And one of the ways that they'd be able to do that, they have 2 guys on their team that could really help playoff teams across the NBA and teams that I will mention later on in this list. And those 2 guys that can help playoff rosters today are Eric Gordon and Christian Wood. The Eric Gordon trade makes much more sense. It's obvious, right? Eric Gordon is in his 30s. Eric Gordon has 2 years left on his deal. Eric Gordon has proved himself to be an outstanding playoff performer and would benefit any team looking to make a playoff push. The problem is, he has 2 years left on his deal, like I just said, right? So a lot of the good teams are already over the cap on cap space. So if you're trading for an Eric Gordon, you're going to have to give up a guy who's making close to the same amount of money, because if you trade for Eric Gordon, that means you're keeping him to next season, and he's owed north of $18 million next season. So that's going to make it tough. It's going to make it tough on the Rockets to make a deal. And then on the backhand of that, the Rockets are going to want some first round pick for him. So if you're a contending team, not only are you going to have to pay a guy who is in his 30s for a season and a half, you're going to have to give up a first round pick and potentially a good asset. So it's going to be tough. The Rockets probably want to make a deal, but it may not happen. But on the other hand, with Christian Wood, I believe we may see something happen at the trade deadline. Christian Wood is a guy that can give you 20 and 10. He's a big guy that can move laterally. He is not a great defender, but he can certainly do the pick and roll. And there are a couple of teams that I'm going to mention that have an opportunity. If they have the opportunity to sign him, they should. They should absolutely take that opportunity and give up some assets to do it. And I'll talk about one of those teams now. The team that definitely needs to make a trade is the Portland Trail Blazers. If you listen to this podcast, you're like, God, Chris, do you gotta bring up the Trailblazers in every podcast? And the answer is yes. I've gotta bring up the Trailblazers in every podcast. Right? I don't know what that voice is, man. I promise I have no idea. But the Blazers are clearly not gonna listen to me. From what I see, they're not trading any of their top 2 players. They're just not gonna do it, right? They're not going to do it. I'm tired of saying, hey, you should trade Damian Lillard or CJ McCollum. If you're not going to trade either one of them, then potentially you want to make some trades yourself to bring in some talent. They could do good with a Christian Wood. I'll tell you that now. The Blazers don't play D, right? So if you're a Blazers fan saying, what are we going to do with Christian Wood? We have Nurkic. First of all, Nurkic ain't really working out. it hasn't worked out. Whenever you've needed him, Blazers fans, he's been injured. So potentially you have an opportunity to change it up and get a Christian Wood. Do I think that changes your prospects to be a championship team? Absolutely not. Does it push you to be a playoff team? Maybe. The Western Conference isn't great. But what it does is it gives you and your fan base an opportunity to at least fool yourselves into thinking that this Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum pairing with another guy will work. See the backhanded compliment? See all the backhand things I just did with the Trailblazers? If you're a Trailblazer fan and you listen to this podcast, you're like, man, this dude hates us. Like, this guy hates us. I don't hate y'all. I'm tired of seeing a team that's in mediocrity not do something about it. Either go all the way in like the Chicago Bulls did or just blow it up. Make a decision, because what they're doing right now is they're barely treading water. They look like they're not even an average NBA team. Let's call a spade a spade. They're not even an average NBA team. They're below average. They may get into the playoffs because the Western Conference is so bad. So they're a team that really should be looking for a Christian Wood or even an Eric Gordon. So they're like my team number 2 to make a trade. Team number 3, and this one's the one that's real spicy. For me, this is a little spicy. The Kings and De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox is 24 years old. I believe he is a talented guard in this league. He has the potential to be a point guard. And the Kings have kind of taken that away from him. The last 20 plus games he's played, he's been phenomenal for the Kings, right? If you're a Kings fan, you're thinking like, bro, Chris, chill. I don't want to see De'Aaron Fox leave. And he's been playing really good because now he's looking more like a shooting guard in his past 20 plus games. But at the same time, the Kings don't look like a franchise that's ready to win. If you can get multiple first round picks for a guy like De'Aaron Fox, maybe, just maybe, you pull off that trade. The problem for the Kings is they've had multiple first round picks for years. Well, maybe not multiple, but they've had high first round draft picks for years, and they've just have not done a good job drafting, right? They missed on Luka Doncic for Marvin Bagley. Not a diss to Marvin Bagley. He's not a bad guy, but you can't miss on Luka Doncic for Marvin Bagley. Right? Like, yeah, there's really nothing else to say there. You can't miss that bad. And it's not even just Luka Doncic. Yeah, you missed Luka Doncic, but you also missed Trae Young. So you missed 2 of the better players in a good draft, right? So this wasn't a bad draft. You missed 2 good players in a good draft, and it really has not worked out. Hasn't worked out for them at all. So at this point, do you want to trade De'Aaron Fox? It's got to be a conversation, right? It's got to be a conversation. And I want to do this. If you look at the 2018 draft, I just talked about Luka Doncic and Marvin Bagley. The Suns go with DeAndre Ayton. A part of them has to regret that a little bit. He's not a bad player. He's certainly better than what Marvin Bagley has shown so far. But then Marvin Bagley is taken number 2, Doncic number 3, Jaren Jackson Jr. number 4, and then Trae Young number 5. And for the Kings, when you're that high in the draft, and to have 3 out of 5 of those players who have proven to be really good, and Jaren Jackson, you could say 4 out of 5. He's been good for the Grizzlies. You got to ask the question. You guys selected the one guy that has not really produced at that top level, and you basically had a 20% chance of messing up. Well, a 20% chance of picking the wrong guy, and you did that. You had an 80% chance of picking a guy who could have been good, and you fell in at 20%. So maybe the Kings and the organization is thinking, we don't want any more first round draft picks. We don't want anything to do any more first round draft picks because we don't know what to do with them. And that may be a situation that they're in. But in my opinion, they should be considering moving out De'Aaron Fox, because if he's not a guard that's going to be a championship guard, if he's not a guard that's going to lead you to the playoffs, then what are you doing? All that's going to happen is he's going to hit free agency at some point and he'll leave. So you might as well get compensation for him now that he's 24 and multiple years remaining, and you have a shot to get some first round draft picks that you're probably going to blow anyway. I'm being mean, but it is just the truth. Okay, let me give you team number 4. So I gave you the Rockets, the Kings, the Blazers. I believe all those teams should be considering trades. Number 4 definitely should be considering a trade is the Sixers. And no, this is not a conversation about that guy. Absolutely not a conversation about him. They should consider trading him, but it's not about him. The Sixers just need more, right? You already know that Joel Embiid is going to miss games. They need a guy that can come in and make a difference. And I truly believe that guy is Eric Gordon, but they've got to somehow make the money work. That's what's so difficult about an Eric Gordon trade. No, this podcast is not about trade speculation and things of that nature. I just talk about sports and I love sports. But this is one of those where I'm putting this in the atmosphere. I believe Daryl Morey reteaming up with Eric Gordon with the Sixers, if they're able to make a trade and make the money work, would be a good idea for that Sixers organization. Eric could come off the bench, he could start, but he would really help that team in the playoffs because let's be honest, the Sixers as currently constituted with their second best player not playing games, they're not a championship contender. They have the potential to win the first round in the playoffs, but that's about it. And I love Joel Embiid, but it's just they don't have it. When you look at the other teams like the Chicago Bulls, the Miami Heat, the Brooklyn Nets, those teams are just better teams. So if you want to make it to the second round and be competitive, you got to make some trade. We'll see what they do. Eric Gordon will be an interesting piece for the Philadelphia 76ers. All right, I want to go cover two teams really quickly. The first one, the fifth team I'm covering is the Cleveland Cavaliers. This is the shocker of the year. The shocker of a lifetime. No one, and I'm talking about nobody expecting DeMar DeRozan to be this great. Sure. No one, and I mean no one, not even JB Bickerstaff, right? And I love JB, right? Not even JB could have predicted this. And if he says, I'd be like, JB, you lying, bro. I'm saying JB like I know him. Like, what's up, JB? I don't know this man. But what I do know is I am absolutely, positively stunned by what they have done this season. Just for the amount of players they lost. They just lost Ricky Rubio. They lost Colin Sexton for basically the season, I believe. And they've lost pretty much every impact player for some games this year. And with COVID being around, and what JB Bickerstaff has been able to do is not even just a next man up. It's the next man up expects to do what he has to do. And it's because every single player on that team has a role. They know what they have to do. No one is trying to do too much. And there is a certain synergy like the Chicago Bulls. There's just this idea. There's this chemistry that it's us against the world. And I, as an individual of this team, don't need to do everything. My teammates have my back. And that comes down to a good coach, which JB has proven himself to be, which is why he got a well-deserved extension during the middle of the season. But you look at the Cavaliers and you see Ricky Rubio go down and you think, all right, this has got to be one injury too many. This has got to be one injury too many. There is no way they can survive. They need a guy. I bring up Eric Gordon again, but maybe even a De'Aaron Fox. No? That don't get you excited? It gets me excited. That would get me very excited if I were a Cavalier fan. And it may be starting off, the attempt to be great too quickly. But at the end of the day, and I don't know how the numbers work with that, because that one I really came up with on the spot. I didn't think about that prior to the podcast. I probably should have. So the numbers may be impossible. But if it's possible, if you're a Cavalier fan, you got to think to yourself, could we give up a draft pick or two to bring in a guy like a De'Aaron Fox and solidify a playoff run? Is it even worth it? That's the question that the Cavs have got to answer. Because they have clearly overachieved to this point. The next question is a playoff appearance this early worth it? Or will they kind of just fizzle out, still be a lottery team? They probably won't be a high pick unless, the lottery ball is the way they bounce for the Cavaliers. They've got the number one pick so many times, right? Like, I don't even know how that has happened. And maybe it bounces their way yet again, but they've got to figure out what they want to do here. Are you going for it? After the Rubio injury, are you trying to make the playoffs? Or will you just try to see if JB can pull off another rabbit out of the hat and somehow get this team to the playoffs? Based on what we have seen in the injuries, I'm not seeing it, because it comes to a point where it's just not even next man up at this point. It's like, God, dog, like there's just so many injuries. I don't know how they can come back from it, but if they want to go all in, and going all in has different degrees. They're not going all in for a championship, but they want to go all in to have a potential playoff run. I think that'd be monumental for a guy like a Mobley, right? They got Jared Allen there. They got a veteran presence in Kevin Love. They've got guys that can perform in the playoffs. And if they want to go for it, I'd be interested in seeing them do that. If you're a Cavs fan, that is a legit question for you. That's something you gotta, when you listen to this podcast, you gotta legitimately think, do I really want my team to go in for a playoff spot? It's a tough spot, right? It is a tough spot for that team and that GM to make. And I'm interested to see what they do at the trade deadline. One more team I want to cover really quickly on this. And we will have a show dedicated to the trade deadline and speculation closer to the deadline. This is kind of a teaser for it, but I also want to talk about the Los Angeles Lakers. There's not much to say. They need a trade. They look as old as everyone said they would look, but now they need to figure out who can't be there anymore. What bodies can we get rid of and what bodies can we bring in? And that's something they're going to need to figure out. There are reports that DeAndre Jordan is on his way out from that team to create an open roster spot. But you look around the league and you see a team that's cash strapped like the Lakers, and there's just not much that they'd be able to do outside of trading Russell Westbrook, which seems to be the answer that most of the media believes is answer to the problem that most of the media believes is Russell Westbrook. I don't necessarily see it that way for the Lakers. This roster was constructed as an older roster, and they're dealing with the consequences of that. I hope LeBron stays healthy. That's all I'll say, man, because the way he is moving right now, I don't know, man. We haven't seen somebody that old moving the way he's been moving, and I'll leave it just like that. They clearly need to make a change. I just don't know what they're going to do. I literally have no idea. There's nothing they're going to do that's going to catapult them to being one of the better teams in the Western Conference. Their record is who they are. They're very, very average basketball team. And people miss when they say, well, Anthony Davis is hurt. Anthony Davis is always hurt. So there's nothing surprising about that. It's not me being mean or being facetious in any way. He is always hurt. So him being hurt is not a surprise. Not a surprise at all. Okay, spend some time with the NBA. I want to cross over and talk about the NFL. And boy, are we in store for a great NFL finale. So a couple podcasts ago, I talked about wanting chaos. We're not quite getting the chaos that I was envisioning, right? A lot of things worked themselves out in week 17. But week 18 still has some hidden gems. There are some hidden gems in week 18. There is a Sunday night football game that's it is going to be win or go home for the Chargers and the Raiders. But there is a scenario. I don't know if you know this. I want to tell you because I'm a weirdo. I want to tell you about the scenario. So come here. Come close. There is a scenario where the final game of the season, the Chargers and the Raiders are playing, and neither team needs to win the game. There's a scenario where if they tie, it'd be in their best interest to tie, because if they were to tie, both teams would make the playoffs. And you know me, I love chaos. I would love nothing more than to see what these two teams would do if they were both made aware, which they would be made aware because they're the final game of the NFL season, of the regular season. If they were both made aware prior to the game, they whispered to the coaches, you guys just need a tie and you both make the playoffs. What do the coaches do? Right? So let's say it's 21-21. It's the fourth quarter. It's 2 minutes left. Justin Herbert has the ball. He's driving. I mean, if you're the Chargers, you're like, hey, man, we could just kneel the ball. Because if Herbert throws a pick six, we lose. And if you're the Raiders, you're like, hey, man, y'all could just kneel the ball. You know, we don't need to block a kick. We don't need you to win. It would be insane if both teams basically knew all they needed to do was tie, and they did just enough to do that. They play the whole 4 quarters. They go through overtime. Kneeling the ball and ending the season with a tie. I know Roger Goodell and the NFL would lose their minds. There'd be a collective NFL mind explosion. their heads would explode and they'd be so furious with the Raiders and the Chargers. And just the me that loves chaos, I would absolutely enjoy that moment. And it'd be interesting to see, let's just say in a hypothetical world, the Raiders and the Chargers knew they could tie and they did everything in their power to tie and they did just that. We'd be looking at, really, we haven't seen anything like that in sports since the World Cup. I'm taking it all the way to soccer. All the way to the World Cup. Years and years ago, I believe it was West Germany, where they essentially knew that they just needed a tie and they were just kicking the ball around, playing in the World Cup. They just kicked the ball around, both teams advanced, and they had to switch up the rules. I would love to see that. I know it's not what many people want to see, but I would just love to see the chaos and how the NFL would handle it. So that's really one of the biggest games of the week. There are other big games that are going to be played, but that's only the one I wanted to cover. So instead of covering the games week or game by game, I would rather give you my top 5 NFL teams heading into the playoffs. That's what I'd rather do. That's what I'm going to do. Top 5, haven't done it for several podcasts. My top 5 teams heading into the playoffs. And what I'll do next week is this. So when the playoffs are here next week, I'll do something interesting for you. This podcast comes out on Saturdays, right? So if you're listening to it, they always come out on Saturdays. Check it out. Saturdays, check them out. That's when they debut, right? The playoff games will start on Saturday. All right. So what I'll do for the podcast is next week's podcast. So I'm foreshadowing right now, right? I'm giving you a reason to come back. So go ahead and come back and subscribe, right? I'm going to go through every playoff game and basically give you my Super Bowl champion and just give you my own bracket. And then the next week, I'll act like I didn't do that and do it again because I'm going to be wrong, right? But that's what I like to do for the playoffs, and I'll do that. So for this week, I'm going to give you my top 5 teams heading into the playoffs, right? Heading into the playoffs, these are the top 5 teams. So it could change after 1 week in the playoffs, right? So heading into the playoffs, these are the top 5 teams. Number 5, the LA Rams. They would be higher in the list, but I am very worried about Matthew Stafford. If you know anything about Matt Schaub, you know what I'm talking about. Matt Schaub, I believe, is the only quarterback in NFL history, I think so, that threw pick sixes in back-to-back-to-back games. It may have been back-to-back-to-back-to-back, right? Texans fans know this very well. And Matt Schaub, not Matt Schaub, see, I called him Matt Schaub. Matthew Stafford, they share the first name, right? Matthew Stafford did just that. He threw picks in back-to-back-to-back games, and I believe they're all pick sixes as well. He has not looked good, but the Rams are so good, they've been able to survive this without him. They've been able to survive this without him. And what's been so amazing to me is their ability to survive this without him. But the problem for the Rams is if he's going to throw pick sixes and interceptions and not look good, they can't survive and make it to a Super Bowl with that. So Matthew Stafford has got to step up. He's got to play better. He's just got to. And I'm not sure what he's seeing out there, but he has a guy that is tearing it up in Cooper Kupp. He is a guy that has really been revitalized in the Rams offense in Odell Beckham Jr. And I just can't understand. It's almost as if he's seeing ghosts out there. Some of these interceptions are just insanely bad. You're not even looking. You did not see that defender there. And I just don't understand what he's doing right now. It makes the Rams look kind of silly if he plays this way because they'd be better off with Jared Goff. He's going to play like this because Jared Goff didn't push the ball down the field greatly, but he didn't make terrible mistakes, right? He wasn't throwing pick sixes. And Matthew Stafford's got to step up. They're my number 5 team heading into the playoffs. They should be higher. So Matthew Stafford's got to step up. Number 4, a lot of people are going to disagree with this, but I'm going to pick them, the Tennessee Titans. They're very likely to end up as the number 1 seed in the AFC. And if you end up as a number 1 seed in the conference with a bye week, I've got to have you in my top 5. And there are a couple things they've got going for them. One, they got A.J. Brown back. That's a good thing. That's a very good thing. Julio Jones is getting healthier. Or maybe not. Right? It's been a tough year for that cat. Derrick Henry is potentially coming back. That's why they're on the list. There's nothing else to say. They have a bye week potentially. They need a bye week. To get the bye week, they need to beat the Houston Texans in week 18. I'm going to go ahead and pencil that in as a win, right? The Texans embarrassed them earlier in the season. I don't see that happening again. I believe they get the number 1 seed. So number 1 seed and Derrick Henry potentially coming back. And they have a guy behind Derrick Henry and D'Onta Foreman who can run the ball pretty good now, right? Because the Titans really didn't have any contingency. It was just Derrick Henry all day. Then Derrick Henry gets injured. They didn't really have a proper contingency. Now they do, and D'Onta Foreman. So you get Derrick Henry potentially back for the playoffs and D'Onta Foreman running behind him. Tannehill has his main guy and A.J. Brown back. Watch out for the Tennessee Titans in the AFC. I have them as a number 4, and I'll tell you the team that's number 6, and I put the Titans over them. Number 6 is the Buffalo Bills. I like the Titans more than I like the Buffalo Bills. It's really a preference, right? If you listen to this show, you could flip-flop them, right? You can have the Buffalo Bills 4 and then push the Titans to number 6. I'm 100% fine with that. I have a preference. If they're met in the playoffs, I'd favor the Titans in that game, and that's really as far as it goes. That's just all it's about. It is truly a toss-up between those two teams. I have the Titans in my top 5. I don't have the Bills in my top 5. Top 3 is pretty solidified. My number 3 team, the team that just wrapped up the number 1 seed, is the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers have it all, man. They got it all. They have Devontae Adams, who is quietly putting together just ridiculous season. You have Aaron Rodgers, who is not being very quiet about it. He's having an MVP-like campaign, and they're the number 1 seed in the NFC. They're number 3, and I'm going to explain why they're number 3 when I explain my number 2. But they're not my number 3, and I can just move on. Number 2 is a team that could end up as the 4th seed at worst, I believe, or maybe even the 5th seed at worst after week 18, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I got to discuss number 2 and number 3 in conjunction, right? So I have the Buccaneers over the Packers. Why? Well, recent history says that Tom Brady going into Lambeau Field for an NFC championship game, Tom Brady wins, right? And that's why they're above them in this list. They've done it already. And Lambeau Field, when I was growing up, this is one of those people who say when I was younger, right? But it's the truth, right? I'm dating myself here, but when I was younger, you didn't go into Lambeau and just win playoff games. It just didn't happen. Literally, it didn't happen. And for whatever reason, after, I already talked about the DeMar DeRozan experience, after that Michael Vick experience, when Michael Vick went to Lambeau and beat the Packers, it seems to me, well, not seems to me, the numbers indicate that going into Lambeau Field is just not the daunting task that it used to be. I need to stop saying seems. It's people go to Lambeau in the playoffs and win all the time. It just has happened over and over and over again. Michael Vick did it. Tom Brady did it. Eli Manning did it. Colin Kaepernick did it. I mean, it's just people go into Lambeau and win. It's just not the mystique that it used to be. And there is no team in the NFC that is afraid of going to Lambeau and beating them. No team in the NFC is afraid of that. They're just not, because it doesn't have the mystique anymore. But Tom Brady still has the Tom Brady mystique, right? And whether Tom Brady is going to Lambeau or whether other teams are going to play Tom Brady in Raymond James Stadium, and that's what they still call it in Tampa Bay, there's that mystique of Tom Brady, right? And this is not me knocking Aaron Rodgers in any way. I'm just saying, if I were a team like the Dallas Cowboys, right? They're a team that's really good, or the LA Rams, or the Arizona Cardinals. If I were on either one of those teams to say, would you rather have to go play at the Buccaneers or have the Buccaneers come to your home, or let's back up. If you had to go at the Buccaneers or at Green Bay, I think most people would say Green Bay. And that's a different type of situation if we're talking 20 seasons ago. I know it's a long time. 20 years is some time, but I'm saying 20 years ago, that's insane. You mean I get a chance to not to play in Lambeau? I don't care who I've got to play. I'll go play anyone. I don't want to go to Lambeau. You don't win in Lambeau in the playoffs. But that mystique is gone. And for that reason, they're number 3. And it's not just that. Last season in the playoffs, Coach Matt LaFleur, for whatever reason, didn't trust. It was very strange. Didn't put the ball in Aaron Rodgers' hand. I don't think he'll make that mistake this season. I truly don't. But perhaps they overcorrect that mistake and don't play sound football and give up a game that way, right? And I just don't trust the Packers at Lambeau. If the Buccaneers have got to go play them there for the NFC Championship, I think the Bucs would beat them again. So that's why I have the Packers number 3, the Bucs number 2. Number 1 team heading to the playoffs for me, they just lost. They just lost to the Cincinnati Bengals. But I still got the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'll tell you why, man. The Kansas City Chiefs have had a tough season. The season has not gone their way. And there is no team, I just talked about nobody being afraid of the Packers. There's no team in the AFC that's afraid of the Chiefs. But I don't think that's a good thing. That's not healthy heading into the playoffs. See, the difference is not having a fear of going to Lambeau. I think that's a healthy thing for teams to have. We're not afraid of going to Lambeau. We can go beat them. If you're the Cowboys, you believe you can go to Lambeau and beat them. If you're the Cardinals, you believe you can go to Lambeau and beat them. I don't think you will, but you can believe it, right? If you're the Rams, you believe you can go to Lambeau and beat them. But if you're a team in the AFC and you think, oh yeah, we're going to catch the Chiefs. This is the year we're going to catch the Chiefs. I think that's dangerous. You need to have a healthy fear of Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And it doesn't exist this season. And I truly believe that a lot of teams in the AFC are going to pay for that. You're going to pay for that. Not having a healthy fear of Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Andy Reid in that cast. You're going to pay for it. I love that they're running the football more with Darrell Williams. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be there to mix it up. Tyreek Hill hasn't had the greatest season in the world, but you better fear him. And teams don't, right? They fear Tyreek Hill, but they just don't have that fear of the Chiefs. And one thing has not been talked about enough this season is the Chiefs' defense is legit. They are really good. And if you don't have respect for that defense, they're going to embarrass you. And I know they just lost to the Bengals, but I'm saying I am picking the Chiefs as the number 1 team heading into the postseason because they are underrated heading into the postseason. And that is the scariest place you want to be, right? Andy Reid teams tend to underperform. They just do. These are just facts. For years when he was with the Eagles, they underperformed. But this season, most people are not picking them to come out of the AFC anyway. They're not, right? They're not the clear favorites. So they really can't underperform. So they're just a dangerous team right now. I believe they're the most dangerous team heading into the playoffs. They're the best team heading into the playoffs. I'm not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl, but heading into the playoffs, I have them number 1 in my power rankings. They are my number 1 team, despite just losing to the Bengals. Okay, that was a podcast. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. It was a little longer today, and I was happy that it went a little longer. I had so much to cover. I want to thank anyone and everyone who is tuning into this podcast. If you are listening to this podcast, please go support theleadsm.com. Please go support the other shows on the Leads Podcast Network. Free basketball is on Mondays with Daniel and them boys over there do what they got to do. I like saying Daniel and them boys, right? I just like saying that. That's my thing. But Daniel and them boys are holding it down with free basketball. And check out all the other shows on the Leads Podcast Network. Also, let us know how good we're doing, right? Let us know how good we're doing, right? We're doing good work out here. I like to acknowledge that. Go to theleadsm.com to read articles and check out other team podcasts for teams in the NBA. Also, check out the NuChannel Sports Podcast. We have shows that are coming up this year. We're starting off this year with a bang with shows. Check out the NuChannel Sports Podcast. You can check out our podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. Podbean, Apple, Stitcher, Google. We are out there. Also, check out our lovely faces on Afro Vibes TV. Afro Vibes TV is an amazing network. We are on there. You can see our lovely faces on there. We have a show, a show on demand. We record once a week. You can check out that show. You can download the Afro Vibes TV app on your phone, on your tablet, or you can download the app through your television, either with Amazon or with Roku. Also, you can check out our website, NuChannelSports.net. That's NuChannel spelled NuChannelSports.net. So happy you joined me. Happy New Year to everyone listening to this podcast. I truly do appreciate y'all. I hope we have a great year. We've got a great year in store with The Lead. We have a great year in store with NuChannel Sports. Check us out, continue to support, and we'll continue to say thank you. As I always end this podcast, stay safe, y'all. Please stay safe. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the NuChannel Sports Podcast. If you like the show, feel free to leave a comment and a 5-star rating. Your support is very much appreciated. Also, don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbean, or on our website, NuChannelSports.net. That's NuChannel spelt N-U, channelsports.net. Got a sports-related question for the crew? Just leave a voicemail on our website. Till next time, have a good one and stay safe out there.